Why Stoics remain calm in chaos. Stoicism. The world you are living in does not reward calm. It rewards speed, reaction, display, and constant movement. Noise is everywhere. Opinions are demanded instantly. Outrage spreads faster than understanding. Uncertainty is no longer occasional. It is continuous. In such a world, remaining calm is often mistaken for weakness, indifference, or detachment from reality. The Stoics saw something different. They understood that calm is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of order within the mind. It is not a temperament you are born with, nor a luxury reserved for peaceful times. It is a discipline, a practiced way of meeting life as it actually is, without denial and without collapse. Stoicism does not promise comfort. It does not tell you that things will turn out as you hope. It does not shield you from loss, injustice, or uncertainty. What it offers instead is clarity, the ability to see what is happening without distortion, the strength to act where action is possible, and the wisdom to stand firm where it is not. Many people today feel constantly provoked by news, by work, by social pressure, by expectations they never agreed to carry. They feel pulled outward, reactive, tense, and internally fragmented. The Stoic response is not withdrawal from life, but a return to what is essential: your judgments, your choices, your character. Calm, in this sense, is not passivity. It is control at the deepest level. Control over how you interpret events, control over what you value, control over the kind of person you choose to be, regardless of circumstances. This is why Stoics remain calm in chaos, not because chaos disappears, but because their minds are no longer ruled by it. Chaos does not begin in the world. It begins in the mind that believes it must control what was never within its power. This is the first and most difficult lesson of Stoicism, and also the most freeing. Until this distinction is understood clearly, calm will always be fragile, dependent on circumstances behaving as we wish. The Stoics observed that human distress is rarely caused by events themselves. It is caused by the judgments we attach to them. A delayed message becomes rejection. A criticism becomes an attack on identity. An uncertain future becomes a threat that must be feared in advance. The mind rushes ahead of reality, inventing meanings, demanding guarantees, resisting what is already unfolding. Stoicism interrupts this habit at its root. It draws a firm line between what depends on you and what does not. Your opinions, intentions, values, and actions belong to you. Outcomes, other people's behavior, reputation, luck, timing, and external conditions do not. This is not a philosophical abstraction. It is a practical boundary meant to preserve your mental stability. Modern life constantly pressures you to violate this boundary. You are encouraged to measure yourself by results alone, to chase validation, to manage impressions, to feel responsible for forces far larger than your influence. When things go wrong, the instinct is to tighten control, to push harder, to mentally rehearse every possible future. This creates the illusion of responsibility without the reality of power. The Stoic refuses this illusion, not out of laziness, but out of clarity. Energy is finite. Attention is limited. When they are wasted on what cannot be directed, the mind becomes exhausted and resentful. Calm disappears not because life is harsh, but because effort is misapplied. Consider how often anxiety is simply effort pointed in the wrong direction. Worrying about tomorrow does not improve tomorrow. Replaying the past does not alter it. Obsessing over how others perceive you does not grant you command over their minds. The Stoic sees these patterns as a form of internal disorder, not a moral failing, but a mistake in judgment that can be corrected. Correction begins with restraint. When an impression arrives, anger, fear, excitement, offense, the Stoic does not immediately consent to it. There is a pause, a space between stimulus and response. In that space, reason is allowed to speak. Is this within my control? Is this judgment necessary? Is my peace worth surrendering to this moment? This pause is where calm is forged, not through suppression of emotion, but through examination. The Stoics did not seek to become unfeeling. They sought to become unruled, to feel without being carried away, to experience without surrendering command of the mind. In modern terms, this means refusing to let every notification dictate your mood, refusing to let every disagreement escalate into identity conflict, refusing to let every setback define your worth. These refusals are quiet, often invisible, but they accumulate into a stable inner posture. Control in Stoicism is not domination, it is alignment. When your effort aligns with what is yours to shape, calm follows naturally. You act where action is possible. You prepare where preparation is useful. And where neither applies, you accept without complaint. This acceptance is frequently misunderstood. It is not resignation. It is not approval of injustice or passivity in the face of harm. It is the refusal to add mental suffering to unavoidable reality. The Stoic still acts against wrongdoing when action is appropriate, but they do not poison their own mind with rage over what cannot be instantly corrected. Rage feels powerful, but it is brittle. It demands immediate resolution from a world that does not obey. When reality resists, rage turns inward, becoming bitterness, exhaustion, or despair. The Stoic chooses endurance instead, not as endurance of pain for its own sake, but endurance of uncertainty without self-destruction. Calm, then, is not something that arrives after chaos passes. It is what allows you to function while chaos is present. It is the difference between being tossed by waves and learning how to keep your footing in rough water. This discipline requires honesty. You must admit how often you attempt to control what cannot be controlled, how often you cling to expectations as if they were guarantees, how often you confuse preference with necessity. The Stoic does not shame himself for these habits. He studies them, the way a physician studies a recurring illness. Each moment becomes an opportunity to practice. A delayed plan becomes training in patience. An insult becomes training in restraint. An uncertain outcome becomes training in trust. Not trust that things will go well, but trust that your character does not depend on them going well. This is how calm is built, slowly, repeatedly, through hundreds of small decisions, not to overstep the limits of your power. The world does not grow quieter, the mind grows clearer, and clarity, sustained over time, becomes steadiness. By learning what to release, the Stoic learns what to protect, not comfort, not status, but the integrity of the mind itself. Part of what makes modern life so mentally exhausting is not the presence of emotion, but the absence of discipline around it. Emotions arrive uninvited, but they are quickly indulged, amplified, justified, and broadcast. Anger is encouraged. Fear is monetized. Desire is constantly provoked. The result is not depth of feeling, but instability. The Stoics understood emotion differently. They did not see emotions as enemies to be crushed, nor as truths to be obeyed. They saw them as signals produced by judgments. Change the judgment, and the emotion loses its authority. Leave the judgment unexamined, and the emotion becomes a master. Most emotional suffering comes from confusing impressions with facts. An impression says, "This is terrible. This is unfair. This threatens me." The untrained mind agrees immediately. It reacts as if the judgment were proven, as if no other interpretation were possible. The Stoic interrupts this agreement. This interruption is subtle. It does not deny the feeling. It does not pretend calm where none exists. It simply refuses to grant the feeling command. The Stoic says, internally, "This is an impression, not a verdict." That single distinction restores agency. Anger provides a clear example. Anger often arises from the belief that something should not have happened, or that someone should not have acted as they did. It contains an implicit demand that reality conform to expectation. When reality refuses, the mind escalates. The Stoic recognizes this demand as the source of disturbance. The question is not whether anger is understandable. Often it is. The question is whether it is useful. Does it improve judgment? Does it sharpen action? Or does it narrow perception and push behavior toward regret? The Stoics observed that anger promises strength, but delivers blindness. This does not mean tolerating injustice silently. It means responding without surrendering rational control. A calm response can still be firm. A measured response can still be decisive. The difference is that action is guided by principle rather than impulse. Fear operates in a similar way. Fear projects the mind into imagined futures and treats them as present threats. The body reacts as if danger were immediate, even when it is speculative. The Stoic brings the mind back to what is actually happening now, not what might happen, not what could happen, what is happening. Often, fear dissolves under this examination. The future remains uncertain, but uncertainty alone is not harm. Harm occurs when the mind rehearses suffering in advance and calls it preparation. The Stoic prepares through reasoned planning, not through emotional anticipation. Desire is more deceptive. It presents itself as motivation, but it often creates dependency. When peace becomes conditional on acquiring something, approval, success, recognition, certainty, the mind becomes fragile. Every delay feels like deprivation. Every obstacle feels personal. The Stoics did not reject desire entirely. They distinguished between preferences and necessities. You may prefer comfort, success, admiration, but you must not confuse them with what is required for a good life. Virtue, clarity, and integrity do not depend on externals. When this distinction is lost, desire turns into anxiety. Attachment follows closely. Modern culture encourages identity to be built on roles, possessions, opinions, and status. When these shift, the sense of self trembles. The Stoic anchors identity elsewhere, not in what can be taken, altered, or withdrawn, but in how one chooses to act. This anchoring creates emotional resilience. Loss still hurts. Disappointment still registers, but the core remains intact. The Stoic does not say, "This does not matter." He says, "This does not define me." Social pressure intensifies emotional volatility. Constant comparison, public judgment, and performative expression distort self-perception. The Stoic withdraws inward, not socially, but mentally. He does not require constant affirmation. He does not outsource self-respect to the crowd. Silence becomes a form of strength here. Not silence as avoidance, but silence as refusal to react impulsively. The Stoics valued measured speech because speech reveals judgment. To speak hastily is to expose unexamined beliefs. To pause is to protect the mind from self-betrayal. Emotional discipline also requires accepting discomfort. Many emotions persist because the mind demands immediate relief. The Stoic allows discomfort to exist without dramatization. He does not rush to escape every unpleasant state. He observes it. He learns its texture. He notices how it rises, peaks, and fades. This observation weakens emotions' grip. When emotions are seen as temporary states rather than commands, their intensity diminishes. Calm returns not because emotions vanish, but because they are no longer feared. The Stoic mind is not empty. It is orderly. Thoughts arise, but they are examined. Feelings surface, but they are contextualized. The inner world becomes governed by reason rather than ruled by impulse. This discipline does not make life sterile. It makes it coherent. Joy becomes quieter, but more stable. Sadness becomes honest, but not overwhelming. Anger becomes rare and brief. Fear becomes informative rather than paralyzing. Over time, emotional mastery changes how chaos is experienced. External disorder no longer creates internal disorder automatically. There is a delay, a buffer, a sense of distance. In that distance, choice lives. Calm, then, is not emotional numbness. It is emotional literacy combined with restraint. It is knowing what you feel, why you feel it, and whether acting on it serves your character. This is why Stoics remain calm in chaos, not because they feel less, but because they are no longer governed by what they feel. Even with control clarified and emotions disciplined, there remains a deeper source of unrest for most people: the refusal to accept impermanence. Much of the inner tension carried today comes from an unspoken demand that life be stable, fair, predictable, and lasting. When it proves otherwise, the mind experiences this not as reality, but as betrayal. The Stoics confronted impermanence directly. They did not soften it, spiritualize it, or postpone it into abstraction. They treated change, loss, decay, and death as facts to be integrated into daily understanding, not to darken life, but to see it clearly. Everything you interact with is temporary. Circumstances shift, bodies weaken, relationships evolve or end, positions change hands, plans unravel. This is not a personal injustice. It is the structure of reality. Resistance to this structure is a primary cause of suffering. The Stoic does not ask life to pause. He asks himself how to stand properly within motion. Calm arises when the mind stops clinging to what cannot be held, when acceptance replaces protest. Fate in Stoicism is not fatalism. It is not the belief that effort is meaningless. It is the recognition that events unfold according to causes beyond individual preference. You participate in this unfolding, but you do not author it alone. To fight this truth is to exhaust yourself. To align with it is to conserve strength. Alignment with fate means this: you meet each event as necessary, not because it is good or pleasant, but because it has arrived. Complaining that it should not have happened does nothing but add friction to what already exists. The Stoic removes this friction. This does not mean liking everything that happens. It means ceasing the internal argument with reality. Energy previously spent on resentment becomes available for response. Loss is where this practice is tested most severely. Loss of people, health, opportunity, identity. The instinct is to ask why, to replay alternatives, to search for blame, The Stoic allows grief without turning it to search for blame. The Stoic allows grief without turning it into accusation against existence itself. Grief, when not resisted, runs its course. It becomes heavy, then lighter. When resisted, it hardens. The Stoic understands that sorrow is natural, but despair is optional. Despair arises when loss is interpreted as meaninglessness rather than change. Impermanence also sharpens attention. When you truly understand that time is limited, trivial concerns lose their grip. Petty status games feel hollow. Endless comparison appears wasteful. Mortality becomes not a threat, but a clarifier. The Stoics practiced remembering death, not to induce fear, but to restore proportion. If this moment were your last, what would deserve your agitation? What would be worth your integrity? What would be beneath your concern? This perspective does not remove ambition or effort. It removes urgency rooted in ego. It allows action without desperation, purpose without anxiety. Injustice presents another challenge. The world is not fair. This fact disturbs many deeply, especially those who expect moral symmetry from reality. The Stoics rejected this expectation. They did not believe the universe rewards virtue consistently or punishes wrongdoing reliably. What the Stoic does believe is that your response to injustice defines your character, regardless of outcome. You may act against wrongdoing. You may speak when conscience demands it, but you do not measure your worth by whether justice prevails. To demand fairness from the world is to surrender peace to forces beyond control. To commit to fairness in your own conduct is to reclaim it. This distinction preserves calm, even in morally difficult conditions. You do what is right because it is right, not because it guarantees success. When success comes, you accept it without pride. When it does not, you endure without bitterness. Uncertainty operates similarly. The modern mind craves guarantees, financial security, stable identity, predictable futures. When these are absent, anxiety fills the gap. The Stoic trains himself to live without guarantees. This does not mean reckless living or neglect of planning. It means understanding that plans are provisional. Preparation is rational. Attachment to outcome is not. When the future is treated as unknown rather than threatening, mental space opens. You act fully in the present without demanding certainty from what has not yet occurred. This acceptance of uncertainty produces quiet confidence, not confidence that things will go well, but confidence that you can meet them well. The Stoic does not say, "I will be safe." He says, "I will be steady." Safety depends on conditions. Steadiness depends on discipline. Over time, this way of thinking reshapes identity. You no longer define yourself by roles alone. Worker, parent, creator, success, failure. These remain, but they do not exhaust who you are. At the core is something more stable, the capacity to judge wisely and act with integrity. When this core is protected, chaos loses its power to disorient. Events still occur, loss still arrives, change still disrupts, but the self is not shattered by them. Calm, then, is not a mood. It is the byproduct of alignment with reality, as it is, rather than as you wish it to be. This alignment requires courage. It requires letting go of comforting illusions. It requires a standing without guarantees. It requires accepting that much of life is indifferent to your preferences, but it also grants freedom. Freedom from constant mental struggle, freedom from resentment, freedom from fear of what must eventually come. This is why Stoics remain calm in chaos, not because they believe chaos will end, but because they no longer depend on order outside themselves to remain whole. When the world shifts, they adjust. When it resists, they endure. When it takes, they release. And through all of this, they preserve the one thing that truly belongs to them, the integrity of their mind. Calm, as the Stoics understood it, is not a gift reserved for the fortunate. It is a condition earned through practice. A steady mind is not the result of a quiet life, but of correct judgment repeated over time. Chaos does not disappear. Pressure does not vanish. What changes is your relationship to them. You begin to see that much of what once disturbed you never truly had authority. That fear was often anticipation, not danger. That anger was often expectation, colliding with reality. That anxiety was often the mind demanding certainty where none exists. When these patterns are recognized, they loosen their hold. Stoicism does not promise happiness in the modern sense. It promises coherence, a life where thought, action, and values are aligned, where emotions are understood rather than obeyed, where effort is directed inward before it is spent outward. This way of living is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not perform well on social platforms, but it endures. In moments of stress, it steadies the breath. In moments of loss, it preserves dignity. In moments of success, it prevents arrogance. In moments of uncertainty, it allows you to stand without collapsing. The Stoic path is not walked once. It is returned to daily. Each irritation is a reminder. Each setback is training. Each choice is an opportunity to reinforce clarity or abandon it. There is no final arrival point, only continued refinement. If you are overwhelmed, this philosophy does not ask you to fix your life all at once. It asks you to govern the next judgment. If you are disciplined, it reminds you not to grow rigid or proud. If you are searching, it offers structure without illusion. Calm is not withdrawal from life. It is engagement without inner disorder. It is meeting the world as it is while refusing to let it dictate who you become. If this way of thinking resonates, continue the practice, return to it when you forget. Walk it when conditions are difficult. And if you find value in exploring this discipline further, you are welcome to continue that exploration here, one clear step at a time.